From Dragon 360, this is Digital Banter, a podcast focused on modern marketing tactics and driving real business results. And now, here are your hosts, James and Zach.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to yet again another episode of Digital Banter. As always, I'm Zach, hosting with my co-host, James.
How's it going, everybody?
This one, so the last couple of weeks, we've had some doozies of episodes. They've been longer. So if you really made it through all the way, hats off to you. They were long conversations, good conversations, but long ones. This, we're taking a little bit of a shift. They've been, not to say this isn't a serious topic, this is definitely more of one that is more top of mind, probably more conversational than the past couple where it's been Q&A. And so really what we're talking about this time is, to put it frankly, competitors. I don't know how to put it any better. Should you run competition campaigns? What does the landscape look like? What is my market share, right? James and I consistently are getting these questions of, there's a decline in demand in the recession. What do we do? We're getting increased asks to launch competitive campaigns and that directly target the impression share of our competitors, or how can we take market share from company A, B, C, and XYZ, right? And then also the big doozy, what is our market share, right? There's no easy answer to this. And so we kind of wanted to tackle this on an aspect of, here's James and I's perspective and conversation and how really we go into a lot of these questions. So yeah, I mean, I think that sums up where we're going with this, James. Really what it comes down to is, what is your opinion on a competitor campaign? And it's a lot harder to just answer that. And there's a lot of things we're going to kind of dive into, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's the roadmap here.
It's a very interesting landscape that we're dealing with right now. I know in our last conversation, we talked about H2 planning and kind of how this is going to be a little bit of a different reposition than what we've done or seen historically, because usually it's about growth. How do we grow? How do we grow? How do we grow? Versus now we're in a position where, we talked about this, the recession has hit. There is less demand out there. So we're seeing a lot of our clients ask about gaining market share and how do they capture more demand, right? How do they capture more market share? And honestly, I think when we're in these questions, it's, if you're one of the people out there who's asking this, I think you're going in the wrong direction. I think, like what we talked about last week, a recession is temporary. It's good in this point to have more of a long-term strategy, because competing for demand is a very difficult thing to do, right? What we're seeing is a decrease in demand. Costs are rising because of that, because you have the same amount of competitors in the space looking for a finite level of demand to capture and trying to shift away from their demand gen activities, their branding activities, to say, like, what are the short-term wins? How can we take one? So we're getting a lot of questions around competitive conquesting campaigns. And to go right into my opinion on competitive conquesting campaigns, I mean, I got to be frank, it's very rare that these end up working out. Yep. There's a lot of things we as a media agency see all the time, like, oh, hey, let's run search campaigns on competitors on the social side. How can we target the followers of our competitors? What are our competitors doing right now? Should we duplicate what, I don't want to say duplicate, but this is what is being asked. It's like, what are they doing that we can leverage, I guess, is the way that it's typically positioned. But really what they mean is what's working for them that we can duplicate. So there's a lot of questions that we get asked. A lot of this stuff really doesn't work. I think that there are some basic foundational things that we will talk about in a little bit that I think you need to have up and ready before you can do any sort of competitive conquesting. But I think, Zach, I think this is probably where we should just dive into each of these common questions and talk about, like, the campaign specifically.
Yeah, really, one thing I think that really comes to mind, and I think this is back old school of how we use competition, and then likewise kind of new school, really it's Google. I think Google is always one of those places where it's always started, right? Because it's easy to do. Let's say your competitor is XYZ, right? You can literally target all keywords, exact and phrase match, and hell, you could even go broad if you really wanted, of that specific competitor's name. What is that going to do for you? I mean, I can almost guarantee it's going to be high cost per click, right? It's very rare that it's not. Your quality score is, odds are, going to be low. At the end of the day, these are all those signs that they talk about. If you go back to Google Search Ads 101, it's Google is punishing you in a sense, right? Low quality score, high cost per click. It's literally their formula of how to charge you at the end of the day. It's keywords that are targeting your specific competitor have nothing to do with your brand. There is a caveat to this that we'll get into near later on when we have kind of some more resolutions and ways that you can do this. But for the most part, looking at this straight on, I mean, you can't just all of a sudden run an ad on XYZ if you're ABC.
I think you worded that perfectly in the fact that Google is punishing you. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that Google has like their list of rules, right? So Google rewards you for having your landing page, ad copy, and keywords all closely aligned to each other. But when you're bidding on when you're bidding on a competitor's brand term, like you can't use their name in your ad. Like Nike can't go out and bid on Adidas and say Nike versus Adidas, see why we're better. There's no real positioning there, but at the same time, like you can't use that. So you can't tie that keyword to your ad copy, to your landing page, because you're not allowed to. So if you're bidding on a competitor's terms, like, yeah, you're thinking of your branded terms, like, oh, they're $1 each, but it could cost you $20 if you're in the SaaS space to bid on a competitor's term. Google doesn't want you to do that. And I think
I will say, before we get too into that, so one caveat people listening to that might say, but I've seen my competitor use my name in their ad, or I've done it before and I didn't get in trouble. One, it's potentially slipped through the review process. To tell you the truth, that is something Google is really cracked down on. The other aspect of that, is your name trademarked, or do you have a registration on it of any sort? If you do, it's a very simple process. I'm not going to go into it, but you can appeal that. So if your competitor is now on your own name and your terms, and they're using your name in their copy, whether it's the header, the description, or even some of their call outs or extensions, at the end of the day, appeal the shit out of that. Google will I've never seen them not side with the business if they can prove that. One, it's their name, and two, you have the proper credentials to prove that is your name. So if you are currently running ads with your competitor name, congratulations, you made it through their automated review system. If you really want to keep doing it, do it. But I really implore you to look at the costs that are raising that versus what else you're running in your whole mix of media.
Yeah, and I don't want to go back and say this stuff doesn't work ever. Like there's always an exception to the rule depending on the industry you're in or whatever. But 9 times out of 10, even if you're getting some level of results from it, the return on your investment at the end of the day is very unlikely to work out. And if it is working out for you, congratulations. You want to know why? It's because your product is probably better. I think where we see a lot of the issues is this, like we've talked about before, we work with a lot of challenger brands. We don't work with a lot of the industry leaders in a certain area. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have a fair share of them, but when you're a challenger brand and you're challenging an industry leader saying like, hey, we want to get market share from these guys because they're the big dogs, like that's when that strategy almost never works. I mean, the words that I always tell our clients is like, don't poke the bear. Because a quick thing, if you ever want to do, and we'll talk about tools in a second, go into SEMrush, tell me how much that competitor is spending. And if they are spending significantly more than you, don't play games, because you're likely bidding. Hopefully you're in a position where you don't have to bid on your branded terms, but that's kind of rarely the case these days. And if you are bidding on your branded terms, like you don't want a competitor in there, because again, are they going to have to spend more than you? Yes, right. But if your average cost per click is $1, but they're spending 20, but what you don't realize is that if your average cost per click is going to go up to $1.20, that's a 20% increase in your overall spending on your brand. And that's going to you're gonna wish you didn't do that at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And this leads back to something, gosh, and this is less on Google. So we're kind of moving away from that Google front. But the next most common thing is, hey, can we just target their followers? Right? If you think about, let's just go to Facebook, and let's say XYZ has a Facebook page. It has decent viewing, right? It's got some followers, probably their clients on some form, trying to stay up to date on potential updates, don't want to read the patch notes or email notes or whatever, right? Can we target all 20,000 people following that page? Honestly, probably not. If they're big enough, there is the potential for you to have them as an interest, right? People interested, if they're liking the page, of course, they're interested in it. That's going to be looped into that. But again, is it really worth your time? At the end of the day, one, you have to look at your industry. You have to look at your direct competitors. Are you their only competitor? Great. That might be worth it. But if you're in a mix of, let's just say, project management tools, God, on one hand, I can name them. I can name so many of them. And they all, probably do about the same thing, right? Kanban, Trello, Monday, ClickUp. I mean, there's 4 right there real quick, right? At the end of the day, there's so many of them that if you were Monday.com and you're going to target all those who are interested in ClickUp or Trello or Kanban, or Asana's another one, right? If you're going to target all those, God, I mean, think about it, James. Are we in a position where we're like, let's find another project management tool? No. We're in our ways of using this project management tool. When we're looking for a project management tool, right, we have a team or someone on the team who is going to be the outreach, going to be looking themselves, looking at exact features we're looking for, and less of hoping an ad shows up that's going to be a miracle worker, right?
Yeah, there's a level of brand awareness there, but again, it's like one of those things where I'm sure if you look at I would rather focus on creating demand for my unique selling proposition rather than trying to take somebody from an existing solution. It's just, it's a very hard thing to do. Like I just think basic psychology, there are a lot of people who are resistant to change. The project management example, it's funny because we always use project management tools as like the example here.
Because it's relatable. It's relatable. I mean, if you're sitting there on LinkedIn or you're on anywhere, how many times do you see something for project management?
But it's just like one of those things where it's such a competitive space where you literally see everything. Like if you do a search for Monday.com, you will see 10 competitors trying to steal market share for Monday.com. And you're like, oh my goodness, there's so many things wrong with that. The fact that,
and they will all save you time and money.
Yeah, and half of them are probably just bidding on the word Monday, which is also a day of the week. And like, let me put it this: there's a lot of room for improvement in that space there. I mean, there's the big dogs, the bears, they're doing pretty well, but some of the new challenger software that comes up every 5 minutes, like there's a lot of silly things that I have seen done over the course of years. And I don't think we have any project management tool clients right now, but we've had our fair share. It's a tough game to play.
For sure. On that same kind of realm, I mean, James, I got to ask you here, how many times have you been asked this question, or let's just say this statement, because it's not necessarily a question, is, hey, I saw them doing this, let's do it too, right? In a way of copycat syndrome.
Usually it's positioned as let's try it, but
okay, let's throw in a couple different words, but at the end of the day, right, it goes back to the idea of duplicating strategy. Why do you want to copy what your competitor's doing? Are you an exact copy of your competitor? Are you not unique yourself?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The game of marketing, there is a lot of learning from each other and trying to figure out what works. And I do think that it is very important to do competitive research, understand what your competitors are testing, because it does give you, it levels the playing field a little bit. But certainly when the conversation comes down to like, hey, they're doing it, let's not do it. I mean, the only time I've ever seen that, typically what that comes from, again, and I feel like everything in the competitive space is like, I made the joke, we call these like ego campaigns, right? Yep. Because there's always some level of ego from a senior level executive of saying like, how can we steal from these guys? How can we do this? How can we do this because they're doing this? Or, hey, I saw this one ad, and you'll see them like, quite frankly, doing things that don't work, right? Like you'll see, oh, I got this screenshot of our competitor's native ad, or like just like weird stuff that you're like, oh boy, here we go.
Here's why that's not a good idea. Yeah, no,
Yeah, it's
you're going to see your competitor's ad. I mean, on some level, no matter what, I mean, unless they're just perfectly blocking your IP, you're going to see your competition come through. It's going to happen. It's going to be normal. On the other side of that, and this is a conversation for another one, is CEOs, and it goes back to the ego aspect, right? Why don't I ever see my own ad? I want to see my ad everywhere, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of knowing what to look at and what not to look at and what are the important factors here. There are times where your competition maybe puts out a whole ad or maybe a video ad, or that should inspire you. Be like, hey, my competition is doing this. Somewhere down the line, they either did a test or they're testing it now. So let's think about that. Let's watch how this evolves, right? And how they play that can help us get through that next level too. In my opinion, you should never replicate what your competition's doing. It's not going to help you. At the end of the day, if someone has seen both, they may not distinguish you as different. But utilizing what they're doing in a way to push yourself further, yeah, of course. I mean, think about it. I don't know. When it comes down to it, how many different types of phones are there? At the end of the day, they all do the same thing. All the different features, Android will release something, Samsung's will release something, you've got iPhone will release a new feature. Eventually, they all add those same features. Just one almost always adds something new at different times. And because they're testing the market for each other, they all pay attention to each other. But Apple still has their own market share. Samsung has their market share. Google Pixel phones have their market share, right? So, but that's a way that you can kind of picture this is use it for inspiration. How do you evolve your brand, your image, but don't make it like this has to be how we do it.
Yeah, I would never look at it as hey, they're doing this channel, let's do this channel too. There are several other layers, and we'll kind of go through these in detail, but it's all about messaging and positioning at the end of the day,
100%.
because that is where you are going to differentiate yourself from the competition, not saying, hey, they started a YouTube channel, let's start a YouTube channel. It's more about doing an analysis of what is the content that they're putting out there, what is their messaging, and how are we going to differentiate ourselves. Like, it's great because you can see what they're doing and you can then position yourself differently. That's the differently, better, cheaper, more features, like whatever it may be. But that's where you want to really set the baseline in your research of this is where we stand, this is where they stand, and this is the direction that we're going because of the direction that they're going.
For sure. One other aspect that I feel like comes up all the damn time, as well as that we are consistently talking about here on the podcast, is gating content. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's a little bit more relevant in this conversation. A lot of people want to gate their content so their competition doesn't see what they're doing. What's their secret sauce, right? At the end of the day, everyone knows the Whopper sauce or the Big Mac sauce is Thousand Island with a little bit more pickle juice or something like that, right? People know that shit, but still people buy a Big Mac, right? The Whopper, they have their own sauce. It's similar. Actually, no, the Whopper doesn't. But either way, they tried it at one point. It wasn't for them because McDonald's has it, right, at the end of the day. So gating your content to block your competition from knowing what you're doing, you're on a whole nother level, especially if you've been listening to our podcast, because we've said this a lot. Your competition's going to get that information. Whether they create a fake account and go through the process and act like they're interested and create a fake company and all this stuff, right? They're going to get it. Or they're going to have someone who knows it anyway, or a simple Google search, or going to G2 or third-party sites that are going to talk about this stuff, right? Your stuff isn't secret anymore. In the nicest way, why hide it for those that really want to see it? Go ahead, James.
I was going to say, that's one that I just can't believe still comes up here and there.
It's brought up all the time. And it's not necessarily that we go into it arguing, right? We try and explain our position of why you don't want to do that. And to be honest with you, I would say it's 50-50 whether our clients listen or not, right? There is this pre-notion in your head of gating content was the way to do it, right? It's lead capture. Right? It's an easy way to get people's information. Again, silly, don't trick people. Why make it harder for again, this is everything we've talked about, right? Don't make it hard for your potential customer, especially someone who's qualified, to work 10 times harder than you are going to at the end of the day. So we've talked
I
about that one
think
a lot. Yeah,
I
please.
was gonna say the same thing applies from a competitive standpoint though too, as far as like where you gate content, where you try to capture a lead. Like the bottom of the funnel stuff is good. Demos, sales calls, contact us information, like trials, even like because a trial you have to have a login to try whatever software you're using in most cases. All of that stuff's great. Continue to gate that stuff. We're talking about like ebook and sales guides
Yes,
and
100%.
case studies, like all of that stuff should just
Even just
be
basic blogs.
yeah.
I mean, all the way down to that level.
Seen that. Subscribe to our blog.
Oh yeah. So those are really some of those common things that we're dealing with, we're hearing, we're literally talked about it this morning on a call. I mean, there's a lot of things. This is not something that if you have these thoughts, you're not alone. So don't feel like we're specifically attacking you. This is very common in the industry, right? So on the other hand of this, there are things you can do right now for how you get an idea of your competition. I think the easiest place to start are what are some of those tools. We've talked about some tools before. In fact, Anthony's even talked about them when we interviewed him, when he was on our podcast as a guest as well, talking about why we were wrong about SEO, which that's a fun little podcast for you. But the number one, in my opinion, is SEMrush or SEMrush. I've heard it both ways. I say SEMrush. At the end of the day, it is one of the easiest ways to understand what your competitor, based on algorithms, is bidding on, how much they're bidding, what is an estimation of what they're spending based on those costs, right? And you can even look, are they wasting their money on you? If they're not bidding against you, why would you bid against them, right? Now, okay, that's probably not the question to ask there, but at the end of the day, you can truly see and get a better understanding of maybe what are some of those non-brand terms that they're taking advantage of that we're not. If they're that closely related to you and you have a couple different USPs or value props that you really push forward, that you really believe in, and they really do challenge this other brand, where are you missing out on? And that's a really good one. Another really good one that I love is SpyFu. I always used to call it SpyFu because in my opinion, it's very similar to SEMrush. I think SEMrush still has more capabilities, but SpyFu I think is a little bit easier to understand at a base level if you don't know what you're looking for.
SpyFu was the OG, and then SEMrush stepped in and just did everything better. That's how That's how I look at what happened there.
Yep. But they're both worth looking at. I will say this. I think SpyFu is, again, if you do not have a background in understanding how to use these tools, SEMrush can take a little bit of understanding, and you can easily get lost in clicking on SEMrush. I will say that. And this is not meant to be a product review podcast, but if you're looking for just a quick insight, you don't have a lot of time, or you don't necessarily know what you're doing yet, in my opinion, go to SpyFu. They have I think they're even cheaper, to be very honest with you, rightfully so. Don't quote me on that, please, but I think it's that way. But either one of those will get down that path. So,
yeah. So, but at the end of it, like those two tools, and I'll speak to SEMrush because when Anthony was on the podcast, he spoke to this too. Like that is like one tool that any digital marketer needs to have.
100%.
Again, I'm not about
any marketing team in general. It does not even just digital marketing.
To be able to go in and see specifically content that your competitors are putting out there, like what are they saying in their ads, what keywords are they bidding on? I will say they're like with all of this though, you have to take the data with a grain of salt. I want to talk a little bit about how these platforms work because I think it'll give some insight into how you should look at the data. So how they work, they're all based off, at least on the search side, they're all based off of search recordings. So it's after the fact recording a search as it happens and recording that data. So everything happens after the fact based on a recorded search. Now with this, there's personalized search, which makes things a little bit different all the time. There is the time that it takes to aggregate that data. And I think that this is the biggest thing that you see in the platforms is typically I don't look at any data for the last 2 months. I'll look at it from 2 to 3 months ago to see how things are trending. So if you're trying to figure out like, oh man, our average cost per click went up on these terms, like I need to see like if our competitors jacked up their budget, like you're not going to be able to get that information from SEMrush for a while. But what you are going to be able to see is what keywords are they targeting, what content are they promoting, what do their ads look like, how they stack up against you. One thing I always recommend is taking, because you know how much you spend and what your keywords are, take your own domain, plug it into SEMrush and see what SEMrush says about you. And that'll immediately tell you how accurate that data is going to be for your industry or how much you should take it with a grain of salt. But again, like what we were saying before, you're thinking about running a competitor campaign. I sure as hell would put your competitor in there before you do it to see if you're poking some gigantic monster that's going to bury you, because I've seen that happen and it happens quite a bit.
For sure.
I guess this kind of jumps into the next one though, too, as far as like you have that question of, hey, we're seeing some competitive shifts in real time. And this is like search specific, but the search auction insights is probably the best tool that you can use, because that's going to tell you how you stack up against competitors using real Google Ads data. I mean, you can get an idea of the percentage of the time you're at the top of the page versus them, how their impression share, which is essentially a level of market share, stacks up against yours, the percentage of overlap that you have, percentage of time that they're at the top of the page. And that's where at a day-to-day optimization level, you can see if competitors are making shifts and how much, really the big thing there is how much their strategy overlaps with yours. But that's like whenever you see rising costs, I actually had a conversation about this today where, hey, we're seeing less demand. And this is a brand where the brand sells on their site and they also sell through distributors like Amazon, eBay, et cetera. So this is a perfect example where everybody's running paid search and shopping, and the amount of demand is going down, but all the resellers are staying the same and their strategies are staying the same. So average cost per clicks are going up, right? So we don't want to get into a how to steal from Peter to pay Paul type thing. Like we want to focus on driving demand, make sure all tides rise together. But again, that's just one great example of the auction insights tool and some of the things we learned there.
Absolutely. One thing that I think, we've kind of mentioned about competitors doing it to you is ultimately shop your own competition. What are they doing? I'm not saying go down the path of wasting a sales member's time. I think that's, in my opinion, that reaches some ethical boundaries, in my opinion. You don't want to waste labor. But understand, what are they doing? Post submitting a lead, right? What is happening? Are you being targeted by different things? Look at the messaging you're being targeted with. On the retargeting aspect, are you being retargeted? What is the messaging in the retargeting? It kind of goes back to understanding more than just what can I get from them, right? You don't necessarily need to download their ebook. In my opinion, it's probably going to be damn similar to your own ebook on some levels. But understanding, what is their landing pages looking like? What is the verbiage there? Gosh, all the way down to what is the type of creative are they doing? So it's more than just shop them for the price. It's shop them for really what does their whole picture look like, a 360 view of what they're doing. You acting as a customer, how are you treated, right? How can you make it, then take that information, how can you make it better? What can you do differently to differentiate yourself, right? What do you feel is annoying as a potential customer? And then don't replicate that, remove that. If it is possible to remove. There are, of course, always steps in some sort of process that need to be there, right? Potentially for legalities, potential for your own sake. I mean, it's potential that the sales team you've done tests on this, whatever, right? Don't disrupt everything, but find the little nuances that you could remove. Likewise, this goes down to the path of talk to your own damn sales team, right? If you're on the marketing team, schedule a meeting with maybe some sales leads or sales manager, whatever the structure is there. Because I guarantee on the calls, there is a question being posed. Great, where are you at in your research phase? Or who else have you looked at? Or what are you currently using? And why are you looking to leave, right? They're going to have some information, even if it's maybe not documented, fully typed out. Understand from your sales team, who are you being compared against? What is your prospects utilizing now? What else have they looked at? Who are they talking to? That's another good way to understand.
Totally. So now we've gone through essentially a lot of the what not to do's a lot of the research that you need to do in order to help actually drive your strategy. So this kind of leads into where do we focus? And this all goes back to marketing 101. Literally, if any of you are business students, what you learned in marketing 101, how does that fall into the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, promotion, distribution?
That's not a P.
Yeah, right. They taught us wrong, but it is what it is. But this is really important because, again, a lot of the flaws that we saw were around, we want to do the same thing as them. How can we match the same media mix as them? How can we try to steal market share for them? But none of that focuses on you. And that's where it's taking the insights from the market from a competitive perspective and saying, how are we going to improve our product? Right? Like, oh, hey, like we talked to our sales team, we're being compared against XYZ, and we're losing to them because of this feature that they created, right?
Yep.
That's a product roadmap thing that you need to add in order to stay competitive. Price is a big one. I think that this is one that I still don't understand how people don't realize what their pricing strategy should be. If you are an industry leader, they're willing to pay a premium. If you are a challenger and you do not have all the same features, like you need to be priced accordingly. I can't tell you how many challenger brands that we've worked with in the past who are struggling to figure out what their unique selling position is, and they're priced at a higher level than who the industry leader is. Like it's just like and there are a lot of different things that you can do, pricing strategy, whether it's a monthly recurring revenue model, ARR, like there's a lot of different ways that you can set up your pricing strategy to make it feel more competitive. But at the end of the day, you really do need to know and understand, how does your product stack up against the competition, and are you priced appropriately? Because if you are more expensive and not as good as a product, you're going to lose 100% of the time. And I can't tell you how many times I've just like come into situations where I'm like, okay, you need to fix one of these 2 things, or else this is just never going to work for you. We're not going to take any market share from anybody in this position. For sure. Distribution is another one, right? Like, especially with SaaS products. Like, I think of distribution as a SaaS project as like how that really does refer to the pricing model a little bit. Like, is it cloud-based? Is it whatever? Like, starting to take a look at those things. Because all that stuff makes a difference. And promotion, the P, is kind of the last one that you always touch, because you got to have those other things figured out before you start promoting what your market positioning is, unique selling points, etc.
For sure. And none of this really happens without understanding the whole picture. And you may have this whole idea, right? But being able to be, one, flexible and understand that you're going to have to pivot yourself in this market, right? And understanding that you may have to change, because there could be a disruptor that comes in and really is a disruptor and challenges you in the future. And you'll have to position yourself in a different way. So understanding your customer and sales feedback. Now, I know in the SaaS world, it's hit or miss if you want to do them, but NPS surveys truly do help you gauge what you're doing well and what you're doing poorly. And yes, I understand in a SaaS world, especially those hoping to either be acquired or go IP, whatever it is, NPS is a small factor there. However, you will never truly get a better understanding of where you are without first understanding that. And now NPS scores do gauge everything from your customer success teams, typically, all the way to your sales team, to your product team, to, every touch point that's happened, right? And so you have to understand everything, because it all starts with the sale, right? You're there meeting with the salesperson or some sort of SDR in the beginning, typically. Then it moves to customer success. And then potentially you're talking to product teams of features that you're requesting, right? It all goes through that level. So having an NPS score, one, of course you want to get 10s every time. But if you get an 8, right, there's 2 points that are missing. There's a reason they didn't give you a 10. So figure out what that is. Whether it's a simple feature, maybe it's a misunderstanding on their end, which is a whole nother aspect. But when you're talking about the competition side, it's rare to see a company, I don't know if there is one that exists, that always gets 10s, because no one is ever perfectly happy. You as a company also need to be evolving. And not all NPS scores are public information. Not everyone posts them. Some people tout them in their marketing, right? Especially if they're touting their reviews on some different level, whether that's a review on G2 or other third-party sites. But understanding the feedback directly from your customer will help you in the long run. One, if you take their feedback and actually implement it or do something about it, one, that builds trust and credibility. And so we're talking about in this landscape of a recession, right? People are wondering, where should they put their dollars? Where should it be invested? Do I need this tool? But if you build the credibility that, hey, you're actually valuable to us, you're important to us, you want to see this out of us, yeah, we'll make it happen. Sure, it might not happen tomorrow, it might take 3 months of development or depending on the ask. But at the end of the day, if you make your customers feel heard and appreciated, that's a whole nother level that keeps them away from your competitor, while the competitor is trying to take them away from you. There's always this game. So, but also another one, and James, you've touched on this one a couple times as well, is creating a category for yourself. I mean, ultimately, what it comes down to is, even if you are project management software, what else are you? You might help them stay organized during the day, but at the end, can you also be, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good example here, James, and it's just slipping my mind.
I think it's just about working towards continuous improvement and understanding your position in the market. Again, going back to the we work with challenger brands thing that I keep saying is that, like, you have to find a way to separate yourself, whatever you're special, like, you need to specialize before you can scale. And this is where, again, you have to figure out where your specialty is and then scale within that specialty and then see how that applies to the larger market and gradually work your way up. But it's everything. Like, creating a category for yourself happens in product, promotion, pricing. You really need to figure out what your unique selling point is and use that in your marketing. It's funny. I feel like I keep hitting on something that's probably like marketing 101, but like super obvious. But I feel like we're not in this industry. There's not too many people who are doing a great job of storytelling and understanding, 100%. Like putting that out there in a very clear way.
100%. On the level of differentiating yourself, this is something I firmly believe in, because the landscape of digital is changing so much, right? One, you have the talks of Web3, right? I'm not saying every company should go into NFTs. That's not where I'm going here. But what you can be looking at are, what are some of these new channels? Don't be afraid to test the waters. Now, I know, again, and you should listen to our previous podcast with Andy, where we talk about where should you put your money? Don't stop innovating. But at the end of the day, test new waters. Some of the biggest new channels right now are TikTok, right? If you're in the SaaS world, let me guess, you're running ads on LinkedIn. Potentially, you have a remarketing strategy that includes display banners and / or Facebook ads, right? It's the same stuff. It's cookie cutter. LinkedIn is where B2B is. But you know where B2B isn't? I shouldn't say isn't, but a lot of it isn't. TikTok, Reddit. Now, I'll say this, Reddit is probably way more used than TikTok, as it is a little bit more on the level of tech and different things like that. But at the end of the day, is your competition there? Have you seen ads on TikTok for your competition? No, probably not. Are you even using TikTok yourself? I recommend you get in the landscape of it. I'm not going to dig too much into it, but at the end of the day, the demographics of TikTok, odds are your buyers are viewing TikTok on some level, or are there, yes, for their pleasure and just utilizing it on a, non-work basis. But it's all about staying on top of mind, right? If your competition isn't on TikTok, God, you have full reign then, right? You can dominate that space. I'm not saying you're going to get a sale from TikTok, but it goes back to the attribution conversation that we've had multiple times, right? Everything matters on some level. Likewise, on Reddit, yeah, it is a little bit more of a forum-based aspect channel, but at the end of the day, a lot of tech individuals, those who are going to be making decisions, they're talking to people about your product. I'm not saying you have to go and invest millions of dollars into these new channels, but again, test the waters. Are you seeing a decent brand lift? Are you seeing more visitors to your website? Are you seeing your display campaigns, or not display, your retargeting campaigns all of a sudden showing more impressions, having higher click-through rates? Are all these different things? yeah, it might be an attribution to TikTok or Reddit or some other new channel. I mean, we could go into others like there's Snapchat exists. You've got programmatic and CTV, not 100% used by B2B companies at this time, but I've seen Salesforce ads. I've seen Facebook meta ads for workplace. There's a lot of these, yeah, big dogs that are doing it. Yes, there's a little bit more of an investment level, but their competition isn't there. And so it's a lot easier for them to show their product without having to worry about is XYZ going to come in and take and increase my cost for my audience.
This is where paid media, I feel like, is a lot like investing, where if you're, it's true though, where you have your investment portfolio and typically what you hear all around is like, oh, you need to diversify your investment portfolio. It's the same thing in the paid media space because you don't know what is going to take off. Again, you usually have like, hey, like I know my 401k is my safety net. That's historically gone up 11% a year for the case of however many years. So you have I'll say the largest chunk of your money in there, but then you have a diversification across crypto, NFTs, real estate, some of the markets that are a little bit more unstable, but could be a big break for you at some point. And it's the same thing in the paid media space where in B2B, like LinkedIn, think of that as like your LinkedIn and paid search or your 401k. And all of these other channels are, I mean, I can't even say that because Facebook and Instagram is very established. TikTok is established now. Snapchat, I have done a couple of geofencing things around some conferences that were a total waste of time. But there is again, there are some things that you can do across these channels. Your audience, I guarantee, is across all of these channels. You do have to use them for what they're good for as far as targeting and things like that. But it is definitely worth diversifying from an organic perspective. It's 100% worth being there. You obviously have to keep in mind budget, effort versus impact, all of those things. But diversification is good at the end of the day.
Absolutely. We're not saying you have to go in and it has to be a winner, but don't be afraid to find out if it is going to work for you. Not every channel is going to be where you need to be. At the end of the day, sure, maybe LinkedIn is the best place for you. As James said, that's your bread and butter in the B2B space. Now, if you're not in the B2B space, because I know we have listeners that listen to us that aren't in the SaaS or B2B space, yeah, try it out. Especially, let's say you're in the trades industry, or let's say you're a landscaper or something like that. I guarantee homeowners are on TikTok. I guarantee homeowners are utilizing
trades.
Reddit.
Oh my goodness, that's like
that opens a whole
TikTok,
world.
YouTube, man. There's some. It's funny, something that we think of as like kind of boring and standard. I don't want to say boring, but it's like everybody needs it and everybody's everywhere, and it's easy to target. There's fun, a fun space to play around in.
It is, and there's a lot you can do with it. So take it on that level as well. Is don't be afraid to have fun with it. That's what marketing should be. It should be fun. At the end of the day, you have a sandbox in front of you. Build whatever you want and see if it stands up. Right at the end of the day. On the other level, there's more than just where you put in your ad. Where should you be testing things? How should you be testing things? There's also your own website of things that you can be doing on a competitive nature. This is one that, James, you speak to a lot, but it's worth trying, is building content pillars around different personas. I'll let you speak to this one because I think this next little part I think I rant on way more on calls.
Yeah, and this goes back to how you align your SEO strategy and SEO 101, right? You're building content around the problems that you're trying to solve, and you're looking at through the lens of who your personas are, who your ICP is, your market positioning, and your unique selling points. It's start with who you're talking to, how you are positioned in the market. Like, are you a challenger brand or a specific niche? All of those different things that go into your market positioning, pricing, et cetera. And then what are your unique selling points that speak directly to those problems? And you're building that out from top of funnel all the way down to bottom of the funnel. And this is where it's kind of back to basics as far as from a competitive standpoint. It is more about messaging and positioning than it is a direct attack, right? And that's where we really need to stay away from, is the direct attack, and more so of like just saying how you're better. You don't need to say
Exactly.
that. You just need to say how you're better.
Absolutely. And this is where a lot of where, when I have this conversation with teams, this is a lot of where I go. At the end of the day, your prospect, 99.9% of the time, know who your competition is. They're either using them or have researched them as well. They've seen them on G2. So trying to ignore them, it's not worth it. What you need to be doing is going back to controlling the narrative. I'm going to shout this out, and it's one of my favorite things I bring up on calls. But if you go to, I believe it's clickup.com/compare, what you're going to have, and this is project management, we bring it up a lot, you're going to see ClickUp against a million other project management systems. That's in a table, and you're going to see check marks next to where things are similar. But what's happening? ClickUp is controlling that narrative. They're saying, yeah, you could go to Asana for X, Y, or Z as well. But here's where ClickUp has features and they don't. Now, those features might not even be something Asana cares about. Maybe Asana is perfect for people who don't need those features. But again, you're not ignoring your competition. You're naming your competition, which actually I feel is important because, again, when people are researching, they want to understand what is the big difference. Why should I go with you? And some people don't want to get on a call, talk to Jim Bob, who's been in sales for 15 years and is going to be a SaaS leader for you. And he's going to tell you exactly why through a presentation that you've seen 600 times. That's 15 pages deep. And it's the same thing every sales call, right? At the end of the day, give them that information. Whether it's in a physical table format or it's simply a, let's say, a blog post that is comparing XYZ versus ABC. Again, control the narrative. People know when they're looking for a project management system. Almost every project management system is going to have a current tasks, completed tasks, archive tasks. What are some other features that you can help them with? If your USP truly is saving time and money for people and that's your only USP, how in the hell are you doing that? Because everyone's doing it. So what makes you so different? Again, showcase what features you have that are different than what your competition has, while also showing what are the basic features that match along the board. What's going to happen is, yes, you may get traffic from people who are naturally searching XYZ versus ABC, or G2 may actually index that on their own site saying, hey, here's a great comparison as well, right? There's all these little factors that could drive people to you without you even having to put effort into building something besides the actual landing page and putting the SEO strategy behind it. Again, rant's kind of over, but every time I've seen someone try and mask or hide their competition from their customers, I've never seen it work good for them. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, if you're afraid to mention your competitor, you're the little fish, they're the big fish. Your prospects already know the big fish. So how do you, the little fish, compete with that, right? And I'm not saying you have to take it head on. You don't have to start a war where their CEO is calling your CEO. Be respectful, but just highlight where you're different.
Oof. Be honest about it too. I think that's
100%. Transparency is key. The minute you try and hide something,
but the thing with some of those checkbox diagram things, like, hey, if you have all the green check marks and then you selectively have the red X's for your competition, okay, we get it. So there is a level of
this is why I bring up this is why I bring up the ClickUp one, because they actually show where they don't have features as well. They actually say, if you want this specific feature, here are the ones for you. And again, I highly implore you to look at this checklist, and you'll see why I'm using it as an example. Sorry, James, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think it is a great example for that reason, because we've all seen we have our 4 competitors stacked up against each other, and we have all green checks, and they have all red X's. Everybody sees through that. Everybody understands that's not true. I mean, to an extent, do people still believe it? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So on the paid media side, we'll get back to what we actually know so we don't have to bring Anthony back on here to yell at us. What are some competitive conquesting tactics that we should try, James?
Yeah. So this is where I wanted to leave everybody with some things that we can actually do, because I feel like we shit on some of the paid search stuff that comes up. And I want to say it's not completely out of the water, and there are some things that we could do. So here are some of my favorite things to test. One of the things that we deal with a lot in any industry is comparison shopping, right? From a competitive perspective, there are people who are comparison shopping. So what I like to run on the search side, where I said, hey, don't go out and just bid on your competitor's brand name. I still don't want you to do that. But a sneaky, interesting thing that you can do is you can go out and bid on your competitor's brand name with a retargeting list layered on top of you. So that what you're doing here is you are targeting people who have visited your website and are also searching for your competitors. So if I am Monday.com and I'm running campaigns for Monday.com against Asana, I could still bid on Asana, but I'm only going to target people who visited Monday.com. You're going to have a very small subset of a list, but at the end of the day, those are the ones that the only people that you care about is the people who are truly comparison shopping. The competitor 100%. Likely isn't going to pick up on it because you're spending pennies on it. You can be a little bit more direct in your messaging. There are some things that you can do there, but you're working with a small subset of people who are comparison shopping, which is fantastic. So that's definitely one thing that I would try. The other thing on the search side is like, it is okay to do true comparison searches. I always do, now would be a phrase match of like your name and your competitor name. So anytime somebody is doing a search for your name and your competitor's name in the same sentence, your ad is going to show up. Again, I feel like a super fair comparison to make because they're searching for your competitor and you at the same time. You want to be part of that conversation. Now, again, what not to do, don't just go bid on your competitor.
Yep.
Like you're taking this and you're bringing it to a much smaller audience that is at least doing research or comparing you versus your competitor, and you can be there to serve that message. And then the last thing I have, this is something that is pretty new, pretty exciting, something that I've been super excited about, and this comes from the connected TV space. So in connected TV, there is a new target. I don't want to say new targeting. It's been out for a little while now, but it's called automatic content recognition. So what this does is allows you to target based off of the content that consumers are watching. So you guys are all thinking, oh yeah, traditional TV, like, oh great, you can see that they're watching Netflix or whatever. That's not what I'm talking. I mean, that is part of it. Like you can record certain things, look for certain words, but what automatic content recognition does is it searches everything that's being watched for select sound bites, certain like text. Basically think of it as like transcribing everything that is seen on connected TV and then creating audiences based off of that. And that includes commercials. So if you your competition is pretty heavy on TV and you want to target somebody who is seeing your competitors' commercials on TV, something that you can do through automatic content recognition. I'll stick to the software space, but say Salesforce is running ads on TV and you want to target everybody who's seen a Salesforce ad with your competing CRM, you can just target everybody who's seen a Salesforce ad, which is kind of cool. It's a way to just make sure that you're staying relevant, maybe like leverage audiences that are different. You know, I've seen it again, TV is more of a brand awareness play. So I think it's a better play than trying to steal. Like, I feel like where this is different from what we were talking about before, like on the social side, like targeting people who like your competitors. It's like, they like your competitors because they are active customers or they're just trying to engage with their content versus this, you're just trying to play off of like where you want to serve ads to the same people you want to be part of the conversation. So it's a little bit more of a fair play atmosphere. I mean, again, you can kind of do like retargeting for search and a layer of like retargeting and a layer of automatic content recognition. So people who visited your website and are seeing ads of your competitors, that would be kind of like a new interesting thing to test, but probably again, a smaller audience. So lots of things in the CTV side I would definitely look into to have some fun and play some games.
For sure. Again, that goes back to test the waters. So I hope this is kind of where we were kind of leaving off here of different things that you can really do, different little tactics. What should you not do? What should you do? Again, there's no perfect answer. And I hope this episode kind of helps clear up maybe how we formulate this conversation, how we tackle it on calls. And this is really just the team. This isn't just James. And I bet this is other digital marketers as well out there, whether you're utilizing us or you're using another team or another agency, or you have your own in-house team. I'm sure these are things that either they know or do as well, but it's good for you to understand it as well, of different ways you can come to the conversation. So thank you so much for joining in with us. I know this is one that has kind of broken the mold of the past couple of weeks, but this is stuff this is a conversation that we are having all the time. So we were like, let's tackle this. Here we go. So we don't have to answer anymore. We can just link it out to our clients as well and be like, shut up, just listen, and go from there. So that's not really how we are. But thank you again for taking the time to listen to us, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Digital Banter. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are uploaded every Friday. In the meantime, keep up with the show by following James and Zach on social media. Links are in the show notes.